Welcome to the Q&A with Sharon's son George podcast. I was my mother's caregiver after she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Unfortunately, she passed on 1/1/2020. We started TogetherForSharon.com in her memory. Today is our early morning rush with the cockadoodles and chicks are all going out. But
We woke up the chickens this morning, George.
thanks. Well, I'm very excited to have. I would only wake up for you two this early on.
Oh, that's so
Oh,
sweet.
But I want to welcome Natalie and JJ from Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver, which is the first really I want to hear all about both of you. But the first question that's burning is, how did you come up with that name? Because sometimes I was worried. I mean, I've said every word in the vocabulary, but that one, sometimes it gets tricky. So where did you get that or derive that name from for your show?
I will say that's all Natalie, George. So I'm going to turn that over to her.
Yeah, so actually I was in the process of writing a book, and I needed some inspiration, and I had talked about it with the sisters because we knew we were going to start a podcast, but I had started just kind of writing a book, and um and I knew it needed to be something snappy and what was an accurate reflection of how I felt. And I I've always loved I love I like the word confession. Like I feel like we're Baptist, George. So I've always
Unfortunately,
been intrigued by the Catholics.
in
They
the
get to go
law.
in that they get to go and they get to say, hey, these are the things. But um the confessions piece of it, but it was really like, what kind of caregiver was I? And JJ and I talked about it, and we played through words. We played through words that would go in front of it. And there were some words that were like, oh, that's too harsh because that's not what it is. But reluctant just kept coming to my mind. And so because reluctant is really about my own stuff. This is how I felt because I didn't feel like I was good enough, or I had guilt because I wasn't doing a good enough job. I was failing at everything. I didn't feel like I did anything good when I was a caregiver at times. I felt like I might get a step ahead and then I'd get knocked back. And I was just like, who would do this on purpose? And so reluctant really did come from like, oh, I'm gonna do it, but I'm not really great at it. I'm sorry in advance.
uh,
And some days I didn't want to do it at all. Some
yeah.
days I just was like, I'm gonna take a pass for today. So, and JJ, when we talked about it, I was like, Jay, and our younger sister Emilie too. I was like, what do you guys think? And they were like, it's perfect.
As long as it's not directed to my police field when you talk about confessions.
I
So
know, right?
that's what I was thinking. But I really appreciate you sharing that. And maybe now we could take a step back or to the beginning and tell us a little bit more about both of you, your other sister. And the one thing I admire is that you have a major support, hopefully. Every day I know it's different, and some days it's a struggle. I myself was a son of someone struggling Parkinson's, and you're the opposite, the female side. So it's nice when we all come together because we really make up all the hopeful possibilities, of caregivers. So maybe you could take us all the way from the beginning.
I'm gonna push it over to Jay.
JJ.
When it started, so we are from a small rural community in Tennessee. That was in the beginning, George. That's how we
In the
started.
beginning, we were born.
But I don't know if
Natalie
you
will.
have enough time for that far, but
And we're
No.
JJ, skip to the caregiving
Okay,
part,
skip
but
to
we
the
were
good
all
part.
born.
your mom.
So Natalie will always want you to know that I'm the oldest,
That
and
is right.
Natalie is the middle, and then we have a younger sister, Emilie. But our we went our separate ways after college. We were all really close. But our mom is an early onset, what they consider early onset Parkinson's. She started with symptoms at 48, and then she was diagnosed at 52. But she really, all that was hidden, we say, by our dad. He was a really large man. He was, 6'2", really broad. And so he really studied her. He kind of hid it for us for quite a while, from the community, from everybody at church. But our dad passed away at 58. So
Sorry,
6 years, yeah, 6 years into it. And we didn't know quite what to do. So she was able to stay by herself for years, I would say probably about 10 years. And then we stepped in 2019 to really become full-time caregivers for her as the disease has progressed. And we say it's been a wild ride, but it takes all three of us. We are quick to say that the Lord knew it would take three people to take care of mom, so he gave her three daughters.
That's
Mhm.
right.
But that is our Parkinson's journey. It goes on every day. We're learning about Parkinson's every day. It's different for everyone every day. I feel like we can read all the books and try to learn, but we mess up on a constant occasion, George. And I think you probably know that, how difficult it is. It's difficult. It's different every day.
Yeah, even talking about my book that might be out sometime in the future, who knows? But it's like I even get nightmares sadly because one chapter is called The Last Week, and that was one of the toughest. So I always say, not the book won't be forever. I'm not there to sell the book. It sounds odd, but like I told you both before, but it'll be out there, but it will be able to take people into what happened, like literally the last few years. But
Yeah.
it's also heartbreaking even to relive when I read it, like when you have to proof it. I had nightmares one night. That's why I kind of rushed to try to get it done just to get it out
Yeah.
there, but you can't do it like that. But you all really resonate with me because unfortunately I have a brother, but he wasn't as involved, so I was on my own. I would dream of having three or two sisters that could have been almost like a team because there were days, during you go through all the grief and obviously you're still fighting.
Mhm.
I'm still fighting for all of you, but it's like you feel alone, anger, resentment, and reluctance, and
Yeah.
Exactly.
it's incredible. I'm still grieving 4 years later, but I appreciate
Yeah.
both of you and your whole family sharing. Maybe one question, which I get a lot. I'm kind of tired of it, but for the viewers out there who aren't aware, what were some of the symptoms, like the first signs, which is what my chapter is called, First Signs,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
Mm.
Parkinson's so different. It's very confusing. That's why there isn't a cure yet. And maybe you could both share a little bit of, I'm not sure your age then, you don't have to share, but like,
JJ's 50, George.
look, I feel 85. I told you last time.
You knew,
But I'm
George, she'd throw out my
48. I
age.
mean,
Yeah.
JJ's 50. We're all 2 years apart.
You're
We're all 2 years
27.
apart.
Yeah.
20.
No. Yeah. But when
When
mom,
did
I
you,
guess, go ahead. When
oh,
she
yeah, when
first
did you start seeing like the years?
Yeah, she was, I guess I was, at that time, I was 28 when she first started, and she was very active. She was working, she had a very successful career. She was public speaking. She was helping aid people in getting claims that had been hurt in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. They had been exposed to uranium. So she's always had that heart to help people. But what we started noticing was she would have slight shakes in her hand, just things that were odd. But the main symptom was that she started dragging her foot, and she would stumble. And that was really the first thing that was really odd for her because she'd always been in good health. She'd been a cheerleader in high school. She'd always been able to, she liked to walk, things like that. And that was really the first symptom. And it's never been a significant cognitive decline until we've gotten to this stage. And that's on and off. Sometimes she's just sharp as a knife, but the hand, the tremor, that initial dragging of her foot was really our first symptom.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
almost sounds, it's hard to explain, but sometimes I feel sad when I hear this, but then
Yeah.
also inspires me to keep going, to keep pushing and never to stop. Every morning I wake up, I always say the only journey I'm not aware of is the one that breaks my heart. And that's
Yeah.
why I was so honored when we finally got to meet and talk, is when I see your posts and like them and share them, they just make me smile for even a moment. And I always
Yeah.
say, Parkinson's can't take that away, our
Yeah.
memory. So
Yeah.
one of my big images is my mother and me. I have it like everywhere. But it's
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
dancing and at my wedding, and that was one of my favorite days ever with my wife. We were so happy, and my mother could really forget Parkinson's in that dance in that moment. So that was really touching. And here we go with the early morning. I don't want to turn this into a Geraldo episode with chairs throwing or Barbara Walters with the crowd.
You
So,
know, George, I will tell you something that's really interesting when you ask about the first symptoms. As soon as mom was diagnosed at 52, she started, I would say, chasing a cure. And I think that,
Yeah.
Natalie, you probably would say the same thing because she was so active and she at that age, she wanted to find it. She was at the Parkinson's, all those international. She went to Canada.
She was in
She was
Australia.
in Seattle. She went to Australia. She was really at all the symposiums. She went to see some of the world's best physicians, because she wanted the cure, and she wanted the cure for everybody. And she was out there asking the right questions. And she actually, much like Natalie, George, she met Dr. I will mention his name, Michael Oken, and he was on a plane coming, or he was going to the symposium in Seattle. And that's how she found out about DBS. It was because she made best friends with him. He was right there beside her on the plane. And
And I
she
make
was
best
always
friends with
asking
everybody.
she was always asking questions about Parkinson's. Anybody she could talk to, she always wanted to learn more so that maybe she could find a cure.
Yeah, well, it's not too late. Actually, they're having their symposium this at 9 a.m. today at UF, so you could join them virtually. But yeah, he's been a pleasure to speak to. He's interviewed with me, and we're doing a podcast together. But it's really important that we just keep fighting. It's not over. The fight's not over, and we do it also in memory of people like my mother, my family, that I think they still matter, and we still have a voice for them. So I appreciate again everything you all do. Let's shift a little about some important areas probably the listeners want to hear. And we always tackle the tougher topics. So the first one is denial. How do you think your mother might have tried to hide Parkinson's? Because I think my mother didn't really hide it, but she didn't want to burden the family. So she didn't tell us. So for many years, she had for 15 years. And I heard the word Parkinson, but wasn't aware until the last 4 years. So maybe we could discuss a little bit about the word denial.
Well, I'll start, and then JJ can fill in. It's very interesting how our mom and dad really talked to us about it as children. Okay, and we weren't small people. We were adults, but we were adult children. But while mom was actively searching for a cure, she didn't want anyone to see the symptoms. Okay. She was embarrassed of them. And she was not even embarrassed. I think she was really conscious of them. And she didn't want people to start seeing her as the diagnosis and lose, I think, her identity. And I don't know that she would have verbalized it exactly that way, but so our dad was a big man. It's funny, Jay, you say 6'2", I say 6'3". He could, in my eyes as a child, he was always like 7 foot tall. Our dad was a very big man. We only had the only daughters. Even the dogs were girls. And so we always joked that it was a dictatorship, but our dad was a very gentle giant. He was he was full of life, but he was a lot more quiet than the sisters and I are. And so we're full of things, but mom would lean on dad. Mom would hold on to him. And so if she started to shake or she got unsteady, if she anything that would lean into any of the visible symptoms, she could hide behind him in that. And even like JJ wrote this beautiful blog, which definitely, George, that's worth sharing. I shared it last night on LinkedIn for this month because we're doing Male Caregiver Month on our podcast to recognize males like yourself. You're on our Male Caregiver series. Yay. Yours is at the end of the month, April 29th to be exact. And so I think that's the thing, is that she relied so much on her dad. And I know Jay mentioned earlier that, dad would kind of help. Dad would help hide it. Dad was like, but nobody would have thought a thing about it because our mom and dad were high school sweethearts. They got married literally right after high school. And they were married for over 40 years before our dad passed. And I think that mom always held on to dad. Our mom is short like JJ. I mean, they're afflicted with short gene. And so Emilie is 6'1", I'm 5'10". JJ is only
5'6.25".
Yeah.
I'm
And so I
16.
would like the minutes to reflect that the quarter is a very impactful, but mom would lean on dad. Mom would always have her arm around dad. They always did. And so you wouldn't see these things. So while mom would tell certain people, she did not really want people to know. Jay, go ahead.
No, I think it was about pity too, George. She did not want anybody to pity her.
Absolutely.
And I think that was she continued to work even after that, even after the diagnosis. And I think one of the funniest things is even with that diagnosis, probably 4 years after, she bought in the denial stage, she could laugh still a little bit. She bought a Hummer, a big Hummer. So
I
imagine
think
having
about-
Ridiculous.
Parkinson's. Imagine having Parkinson's and having to get in this big Hummer. Because she was dragging her foot. She was still having some tremors. And she would always say, she wanted to get a license plate that said shaken. And I was like, Mom, you can't do that. But she had a great
I
sense
would
of
have said she
humor
could.
about it. Yeah, I was like, she had a great sense of humor about it. But when you talk about denial, I'll tell you, I think even to this day, because she's 69 now and she'll be 70 in August, but it that she still has problems going out. She doesn't want anybody to see it. And I still think sometimes to this day, she doesn't, it's still hard for her to say, this is my life. And I think in a certain sense, George, and you and I, when we had our podcast with you, you brought me to tears on a couple occasions. So I will say this, there are parts in my life that I almost want to deny it, but I think a lot of that goes along with I'm still I've accepted it, but I'm angry about it because there's so much of the friendship and the life that we had with our mom, vacations and the life that she could have had with my niece and nephew, just the activity, family activity that we lost. And so I've accepted it. I sometimes deny it. I want her to go places. I kept her. I had respite for my other sister who was keeping her full time. And one afternoon, she got up and I had planned to go to dinner. I was going shopping. I had all these plans
All the normal things we would do
I
growing
would
up.
do with my mom. And she got up and it was a bad day.
Mm.
And so I had denied it in my mind that she had Parkinson's. I was expecting her to be like me. We were going to be full of energy and maybe even go to church. It was Sunday. It was in my mind, I just thought she was fine. And I didn't accept Parkinson's that day. And this was just like a year ago. And it was there. And I had, it was even that day was a realization like, hey, it is here. So.
I had the similar experience where we wanted my mother to go out, but she also didn't want to at some point. And the nice thing that I was lucky is I had my wife and she brought the party to my mother. So she brought,
We
I
love your
like that
wife,
she brought
George.
the party to my
she
mother.
brought, she
We
brought
love your
them out.
wife.
And that was important because even if some days she couldn't even do it, but then
Yeah.
some days when, even for a moment when she had her hair done, she just felt like a person again. So it meant
Mhm.
to me.
Yeah.
I want to share your website and talk a little bit about what you're all doing. We have so much to talk about in so little time, but maybe as I switch over, because it's technical fun, you can just talk a little bit about the opposite side. You mentioned that you're covering male caregivers, but maybe you could tell the viewers and me, because I'd like to learn what some of the tougher areas are being female caregivers, because I know I tried to stay out of, the bathroom and the shower, but I imagine you might do a little more. Maybe you could talk about the female struggles. So again, I want to get more to the lighter things, but this is the tough topics I think we have to
Yeah.
talk about because someone out there might really be interested in learning
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
So I'll
Well,
share
I
your
mean,
while you're.
I will tell you this. So we have the podcast. Oh, thanks. We have the podcast, and we've talked about this a little bit, and we really do believe that laughter is some of the best medicine to help get you through the hard times. And so that's one of the reasons, like we talk about relate, educate, inspire, laugh. And and I always say we will have no problem laughing. And because otherwise it makes it so much harder is what I'm going to say. It makes because there's some days that you are flat out just crying. We got a snot sandwich going on, and we've had that numerous times. We've had snot sandwiches. We've had all kinds of crazy things happen. And that's just in the last 12 months. And so if you really want to hear some of the crazy stuff, our episode on reflections and resolutions of 2023, that podcast from December 26th, George, is pretty good. But I think because this is where the sisters and I are talking about some of the hardships from the year. So, Emilie mentioned, mom should not have been moving too fast. She started scooting too fast. And they both, mom started to fall. Emilie went to go catch her, and Emilie's not a small gal. And you can see that Emile's 6'1", and Emilie goes to catch her. She falls. They start laughing. And then I'm pretty sure both of them peed on themselves. And so, but, and then, I have mom during the early days when we, we had to make the difficult decision with our mom that it was time for her to look at an assisted living because she was not getting out in the community like she needed. It was impacting her mental health and her physical health because she wasn't getting out. Because JJ and I and Emilie were all long distance caregivers. And so we just lived varying distances away from our mom. And so, we're in Walmart in North Carolina. Mom eats something that did not settle. And we've all been there. We can all relate to that. And mom got sick in the bathroom at Walmart. And this was an old Walmart, George. I think that's important to note. And I go in the bathroom and mom is not feeling good. I'm like, Mom, open up the door. So this is where it's good to be a girl, George, because we shared one bathroom growing up and there was no shame. We're walking in, we're girls. That was the thing. We're all girls. That's fine. And I'm like, Mom, open the bathroom, open the stall. I can't do it. Open the stall, Mom. Because it was bad. And she was like, I can't do it. I can't move. I'm locked up. And I said, all right, I'm coming in. So I crawled underneath the stall in the nastiest Walmart in North Carolina. And there was no laughing at that moment, George. There was a lot of cursing under my breath of like, I am not believing this happened because I had literally just dropped JJ off. And JJ is the oldest, and I always put JJ in charge. She tells us what we really want to do, and then we just fall in line. And but we did it, and we got in and we got cleaned up, and it was okay. And I was not happy, and I wasn't mad at my mom. I was mad at the situation. Like, I am not believing I am crawling under some nasty stall and I can't believe this. Like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And I think that's what a lot of people will, when they think about caregiving, whether it's Parkinson's or cancer or whatever it is, this is not what I thought life was going to be. And you feel robbed. And I think that's a genuine feeling, regardless of, not race, but gender, whether you're black, white, yellow, male, female, whatever. We're just like, I didn't think this was going to happen.
Yeah.
I know, George, you said, as far as for us, as the females, because there's a lot of females in my house. I mean, in our house, Dad was always like, I'm stepping out when you guys, have a war or something, because my mom was included, because my mom was young when she had us. She was 19 when I was born, 21 with Natalie, and 23 with Emilie. And so we all grew up at the same time. But something we always said was that you say some of the worst things to the people that you love the most. And as females, that was really true. And as we've gone through this journey for the four of us, the reversing of the role and having to take, and you don't want to say control, but having to switch those roles, that has been really hard. I can't say that I think we've had a really easier time with a lot of the physical aspects of caring for mom. We want to always make sure that she is we don't ever want her to be ashamed, taking care of taking showers and things like that. So we really are careful about things like that. We always want to keep her modest, because those things are important to her.
Well, it's dignity.
But it's dignity. And but I think a big thing for us is that reversal of roles and what Parkinson's can do to you. And there are some, I think maybe because we're females, I don't know, maybe it's males too. It probably is. And we've learned a lot about that in the caregiver series with males, but there can be some really ugly words. And it's because of that reversal of roles. And it's kind of like, Mom, you can't do this. You can't use the stove. That's when we really started trying to keep her safe. And, or she just would get out of line, and we're like, Mom, you can't say this, you can't do these things to another sister. And I think that's some of the hardest things that we've learned as females is you have to work really hard to say nice things and to be really patient with one another. And I think that's one of the hardest things we've come across, because some of these things you wouldn't say to anybody else. And Natalie, I think you might agree with me. You're like, Yeah,
I want to
and
make sure we're clear on
yeah.
harsh words, because I
Yeah,
mean, we're
well,
not verbally abusing our
no,
mother.
no, 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 no.
And but let me just say this: we're not verbally
Yeah,
abusing our mother.
yeah,
But
no,
we think about the arguments that you'll get in and the things
yeah,
that might be said that you regret later, like, oh,
yeah,
I wish, why are you such a hateful, whatever. Like, you think about arguments that you've gone in with people. Our mom is a very strong-willed
yeah,
woman. Okay, so let's start with our mother was out in the community, very strong-willed, and she knows exactly what she wants. And so with us, we are also three strong-willed women. So when you have four strong-willed women all together, and our mom is struggling to maintain her identity as a mother, and we're having to come in on top of that to say, Mom, we had to sell the car. You can't drive it. Stop doing Facebook Lives as you're driving. You're not making great, safe decisions. And so that was hard initially. And at this point, it is, Mom, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're not going to do. Because based on some days, it feels like she's really sharp as a tack. And other days, she makes some poor choices, and it can almost come across as in the true reversal, where we are the parent and she acts at times like it's almost like childlike. And I'm not saying our mom's acting like a child, but when we ask her, like, Mom, this is a true story. Our mom gave away her dresser. We found out from someone that our mom had given away furniture that we had bought. And JJ calls Mom, and Mom, did you do this? And it was, no, I didn't do that. I was just letting them borrow it.
Hmm.
That's what I mean by, like, it becomes this weird shift. And, here's the thing. I don't want to do that.
no,
I don't want to tell my mom she can't do something. I don't want to tell her what she can, because I don't want that. And I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing is the reluctance comes from that. I don't want to have to tell you. I hate Parkinson's. We hate Parkinson's. We
Oh,
have
yeah.
no issue with hating it. Like, assign the emotion to the illness, not the person.
Yeah.
That is what I would really tell caregivers who are feeling this way. And George, I don't know if you felt that way. Like, at some point, maybe you got frustrated with your mom because you needed her to do something. She wanted to do something she wanted. And you're like, no, I know what's best.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean?
That's
And
harsh for me. I think that's when I say that word, it's like, that is so hard for me to say, no, I know best. That
Yeah.
hurts my heart. And I think that's the hardest part for us having
because
to
she's our
step in.
mom. She's
Yeah.
supposed to be in charge, like the parent. Think about the parent role. We're kids. We just fall in line. And then all of a sudden, and that's where it gets hard. And Emilie, Emilie and JJ had it harder than me because of each relationship with the child is different. So my mom's relationship and mine is different. JJ's is different than mom's, and Emilie's is different. And so I think that's the other thing that can be really hard. And that's just the truth. Like, you have to look at your relationship, and then how do you, and then we have a stream and text group, George, like, what's going on, who's talked to Mom, because sometimes she likes Cokes a lot, and she'll be like, oh, nobody's sent me any Cokes, Natalie. JJ didn't order it. And I'm like, JJ, did you not order Mom? I ordered her 50 cans last week.
Yeah, you touched on so many important areas. I remember the toughest part was for me taking away my mother's car keys, and she was
Yeah.
an independent woman, and now you're telling, so that was really tough. Also, you mentioned about arguments. I joke, even today, Sundays, we would all get together and we all fought like a holy war over where to order from.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
It's a holy war.
My
It's
mother
that.
wants it, and it was like bad. So now the Sunday's coming, I miss that. But
I
my
know.
wife never understood why would you? Because we were angry. I want a taco. No, I want barbecue. This is getting, after a while, I just walked away and said, "I'm not eating." No, I'm skinny.
You're like,
you
I'll
look
show
back.
you.
But you mentioned so many areas that we could talk, for 100 hours, because I think
I
we have,
know.
unfortunately, a lot of similar things, but also I love being with all of you because it's like I don't feel alone. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's too late for us, but I think of your mother and your family when I, stay up Friday night on a podcast or Saturday morning on one, and then tomorrow we actually are going to have a table and for the Parkinson's Foundation moving day
Yeah.
walk. And then next week's the American Parkinson's Disease Association Symposium, and then
Mm-hmm.
going to the Unity Walk from Michael J. Fox the end of the month, which will be the same. hours airs, which will be exciting. But just some days I feel like we still have to do more, even though yesterday I decided to lay down because I was going to pass out. I have a lot of back pain, as you know, but I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm laying there and I decided, why not video this? And I got right up and said, we can't rest because we don't have time. We have so many people out there who have worse, you know, fighting this disease that you just a little back pain or major, we'll just have to wait. But I appreciate both of you being so honest and sharing. I want to just kind of show everyone, if you want to take a little virtual tour of the website, here are the beautiful ladies. And then I just noticed, and if you send me this, I have to take a screenshot and I'll share it
Yeah.
everywhere. But I recognize this guy on the left.
I
I
know.
know.
But maybe you could tell us a little bit about what the viewers can find. And I didn't realize I was excited to see you on Health Radio. I've been interviewed by them too, but
Yeah.
maybe you could take us a little bit through the website.
So the website you can download any of our podcasts from there. And right now we're probably over 130 podcasts that we've done since January of 24. We
23.
also 23. Oh gosh, excuse me.
You're welcome for that
I
correction,
know,
right on
thank you.
public
Correction.
It gives you information on us. It gives you our background. Each of us gives you a lot of funny photos as well. Lists of resources that we offer out there, and that list is growing constantly. Places that we go to try and find information, and we encourage people, if they have information, pass it on over to us. We love to share that. We also have some blogs out there, just our thoughts on things, situations we've had. We had an issue with Medicare where they thought mom had passed away, and they classified her as deceased and canceled our Medicare. That was a nightmare situation, but those things happen. And so we've had a lot of series that have come out, and we put those on there. One of our first ones was Heroes Caring for Heroes, and that was focused on military veterans. That was last November. And so any of our series are also focused, they've got pages on there as well.
I appreciate it. And everyone, please visit confessions of a reluctant caregiver.com, which I hope everyone, do you ever have anyone saying it's hard to spell?
No. Well, we know it's long, but we're serious about confessions. So
Yeah.
I'll say this, George, if you flip back up to the top, you'll be able to see under the, I think, look under resources under blog. Click on that one. And so if you look at it, there's our dad, the one I was telling you about. So excuse me, the one that has, that's a picture of our dad right there. Our dad loved to ride motorcycles, and it's the perfect picture to remember him. That like our dad's birthday was yesterday. Our aunt reminded us that yesterday he would have been 71, and she was talking with her siblings. So my dad was the oldest of 5 siblings. And this picture of him looking over smiling is my husband and I were riding our Harley Davidsons with him. Our mom and him had gone. And so if you notice, for you guys who, this is an electric glide and it has a big touring pack. And so one of the things that mom and dad love to do is ride motorcycles. Our dad was a huge Harley fan. And mom was able to, even with her Parkinson's, it didn't matter. She could get on the back. He would help her on the back, and it offered her normalcy. It offered her the opportunity to feel free, and for them to feel like they had, like they were, because they rode motorcycles in Hawaii. They rode everywhere. And our dad did a motorcycle ministry and with pastor, and you got to love that. I'm like, and so he was a big guy, and he loved our mother. That's my answer. And so when JJ wrote this, I'm sitting here like, you know, I'm like an M&M. I'm like a hard candy shell on the outside, and I'm all soft on the inside, and I'm all like tearing up, because here's the honest part. As children of a parent with Parkinson's, like it's different, I think, whether you have a sibling or if it's your spouse or another person. But as I read that, I didn't see my mom's illness, because our dad did what so many caregivers do, which is he never complained. He never complained about it. He didn't really talk a lot about it. He'd tell us that he helped mom, but he didn't make a big deal about it because he wanted us to focus on mom. And I don't think that our dad had no health issues, and he died of a massive heart attack. literally dropped dead playing softball on the 4th of July. And he was out with his brothers, and they were hitting balls. And, I wonder today, because we know the impact that caregiving can have on the individual, the caregiver's health. And I wonder if there had been signs that dad was not doing okay, and he ignored them, and he didn't go to the doctor the frequency that he should have. And so I think about things like that. And George, even thinking about yourself, you
Mhm.
sit here and you say, I've got back pain. I feel like I need to lay down, but I got to get back up. And I'm like, George, take care of yourself. Like,
So
there's
you
other people
yeah,
carrying the torch too. Like,
yeah.
we'll carry it right with you.
Yeah. So we want you to take care of
We want
you,
you to take
George.
care.
So you can take care. We got to all be strong so we can carry on the mission. So we'll carry while you take a little nap. That's all.
Your
We'll give
honorary
you a nap.
sisters
Yeah.
will
Your
help.
honorary sisters.
Today, we'll dedicate today's podcast in memory of your father. That's what
Thank you.
and
Thank you, George.
and
Thank
so
you.
everyone listening, please head to their website, support them. I'll be sharing it. And again, it doesn't end here just with this talk today. It has to continue on until we
It
find
does.
I wanted to shift just for a few moments too about more about you both.
Ah.
We never get time. I know one of my talks, I don't even want to talk about myself because it's not about me, but so what's one moment or the most memorable moment that you both have that stands out throughout your work with awareness so far in your time advocating for a cure? So memorable moment. This is where we get into the Barbara Walter section where everyone starts calling.
Gosh.
We can come back to them. If have
Well, I
people,
got to think. There's so many.
we're limited to time.
Yeah,
I
well,
have
I
more.
think I'll
Yeah.
tell you one. I will tell you one, and this was kind of Natalie and I. What took our care. This is important, I think, for everybody that struggles with Parkinson's. What took us to full-time caregivers was Mom entered into a state of Parkinson's psychosis, George, and you know about this. She had several doctors. They weren't talking to one another. This is a problem. Throughout the healthcare system, we had some that were medicating her with certain things. She's got on carbidopa, levodopa. They're giving her all kinds of medication. And in 2019, she pretty much overdosed. She went into a state of psychosis. And we took her to the hospital, and we were going to have her transported to a facility to not only help her get out of the psychosis, but to get her medication corrected. And I remember they said that she had to ride from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, a 2-hour drive to Chattanooga. And I remember the experience was this sheriff's officer came in, and I had Natalie on the phone, and she said they're going to say that she has to ride in a sheriff's car. And he came in, and he told me that they were going to put her in handcuffs. That was because she was obviously they were going to have to commit her, and she was going to be a
And
danger.
let me pause here for 1
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
They did not recognize that she was in a Parkinson's induced psychosis.
Right.
They thought it was a general mental health issue. And so
Right.
there's a lot of education that needs to happen for
Right.
physicians related to individuals with Parkinson's.
Parkinson's.
Go ahead, Jay.
And I remember we were on the phone, and Natalie was like, no, no. And I remember I want everybody to know that you can always advocate, because we stood up and we said, it was killing me. First of all, they wouldn't let me take her. And that's a hard moment like that. If you have regrets and you think, is there anything else I could do? But I knew that to get us to that place, she could have help. I had to let her go. But we said, no, you're not going to put these handcuffs on her. This is the situation. She has Parkinson's. She has a movement disorder. Wake up, be a human being. Don't follow a policy. I said, can she take her water with her? No. She will spill the water. No, she has to have the water. She absolutely has to have the water. And to everybody who you say about your caregiving journey, what you've learned, the thing I would say is, stand strong and stand up for the person you're caring for, and know that your voice can be heard, and don't back down on stuff like that. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned, is that I don't back down for my mom, and we don't back down together. We have each other on the phone, and we're like, no. So
Yeah.
that's my
I'll be
mine.
And the future book I'm planning is about policing and Parkinson's, which is unfortunately they're not aware. So maybe you two want to contribute to it because I'm gonna have to do a lot of research. I want to hear.
Yeah.
I'll probably add stories like what you just had, and
Mhm.
it's not to blame police like me, but
No,
just to
Oh,
help.
that's a policy, George.
it's a state policy.
It
Yeah.
was,
Right.
she was
So we
being
need to change
TDO'd.
it. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was it, George. She was being TDO because they didn't understand that it was they didn't know that it was a medication induced psychosis because
Right.
it was
Yeah.
too much dopamine with conjunction
Yeah.
with other things. And I think that's the thing. The police weren't our enemy.
No.
It was that
No.
they didn't understand. And even the people at the hospital didn't understand.
Yeah.
And she was placed into a facility to help from the mental health side. And then they realized, hey, we need something different. And that's when we found, and this is a resource,
Right.
Shands down through the University of Florida is a Parkinson's Center of Excellence. And they have a Parkinson's acute unit for individuals that have mental illness that is brought about by Parkinson's, because Parkinson's exasperates it, and the medication, and especially dopamine. I work in the mental health field. Too much dopamine creates problems.
Mhm.
And there is a thing called dopamine dysregulation disorder. And so for individuals, and this is really important, as people who are taking dopamine to address the side effects, and so that's carbidopa levodopa. I'm sure I butchered that, but as they're taking it and the medication increases, our mom at this point is at the end of her Parkinson's journey. She's had it for 20 years, and so. And it affects everyone differently, but she takes so much dopamine and she can't take it by pill anymore. She actually has a duopa pump, and she has it where it free flows into her body because her body needs that. But a dopamine dysregulation disorder is your body, an individual starts to crave this dopamine. They need more and more and more, which is, as Parkinson's goes further on, you need more. Well, if you're not careful and you don't have the right cocktail, you can start to go across and hit that edge of psychosis because it will throw you into that. And so it's always this fine dance with your neurologist to be able to manage how much dopamine is going in your body. And the side effects of that is it can be verbal aggression. It can be physical aggression. This is an absolute DSM-5 diagnosis, dopamine dysregulation disorder. So if you're working with someone and their behaviors seem really, really off, we really want people to understand about Parkinson's psychosis and how dopamine and the medications, if not managed well, can throw your loved one into a state of psychosis. And it's hard to get them out of that. And practitioners, mental health providers, are not trained like this. They're not trained to be really identify it quicker. They see the psychosis, but they don't realize there's too much dopamine in the body. So when you back off that dopamine, it helps to pull that psychosis back. And it took our mom almost 2 months to get it straight. And so I think that's really important. I think if there's anything the listeners hear is that, fight like hell to have your voice heard, and be aware of some of the side effects of these meds when they're in there. They're meant to help, but there's times that if they're not managed well, you can have a negative effect, and it's hard to find the why behind the behavior.
I appreciate it. And as you speak, both of you, I just come up with more and more things to talk about. And we need a series for sisters and one son, like three men and a baby. Now we'll have three
That's
sisters.
great. It's a joint podcast, George. We love
That
it.
would be great.
Love a
We
joint podcast, George.
need to have an annual or every bi-month. But there's just so many topics, but I just wanted to see if there's any final words you might have to the listeners, and please share this with everyone out there if you're listening. It's again, not just about a quick conversation. It just has to continue until we find a cure. But I don't know if you had any last notes or wishes for the Parkinson's community. We also send our love to your family.
Thank you. Jay?
I just, for everybody that is the caregiver for people that have Parkinson's, because that really is the focus of our podcast, George. Just, you are doing a great job. don't be too hard on yourself. Give yourself as much grace as you give everybody else. I think that's always our message. Just give yourself grace. You're doing a great job.
I appreciate it.
I definitely, you have permission to feel all the feelings. And I think the hardest thing for me, George, whether it's Parkinson's, my husband's a cancer survivor, the hardest thing is that you're allowed to feel all the feelings. And you need to find someone to talk to, whether it's a group, whether it's a therapist. We are always big fans of talk to someone, because just because your loved one has Parkinson's doesn't mean that your feelings and thoughts and emotions and all the things that make it hard for you, both things can be true at once. It can be hard for you too. And I think that's the biggest thing, is take care of you, because if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of your loved one. And so, and give yourself grace, because, we long for the days of the girl trips. We long for the days, George, of going back when we in our teenage years, when we'd go to Florida together. And it was just the girls. Dad was always, Dad was like, you guys go do that. But remember the good times and try to make as many positive memories as you can.
Thank you both. This podcast will be a memory of both, your father, because he still will live on through all of us, and we send our love. So I end every podcast with this message to everyone: we love you, we support you, we care a lot about you, and you're never alone. We'll all advocate together for you and for your family, and together our voices are so much stronger. And I always say we're just getting started, but because every time I meet somebody or hear a new journey or now hear about your dad and your mom, it restarts me almost like a Hummer engine just falling apart. I want to just get back and keep going. So I really appreciate your time and all you do. Please, again, support the lovely ladies here and also on all their missions and podcasts. And I'll be, liking and sharing. But this has been another episode of Q&A with Sharon and George. And again, I just want to send hugs, virtual hugs, love, and support. Thank you both.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having
George.
us.
Thanks.